Today, let's take a Goliath-sized sledgehammer and smash up the Overton window. I like doing that. When I started the Heritage Party, I wrote the manifesto, and the introduction to the manifesto says this: we, as the living generation, are responsible for looking after the heritage which has been passed to us from our forefathers, and we have a duty to pass it on to the generations which will come after us. Now, it's no surprise to any of you watching that our civilization is under attack from multiple different things and directions, both from without and especially from within. But it's not just our civilization as a whole that is under attack. Our children are specifically being targeted, and this is absolutely heinous. There are many, many things that are specifically targeting our children. The first of which I want to talk about is the experimental injections. Now, we all know that we've lived through 4 years of insanity with COVID and lockdowns and injections. But these were things that should never, ever have been injected into a single human being, let alone millions, tens of millions, actually, billions of people around the world. Since the thalidomide disaster in the 1950s and 1960s, there have been strict safety protocols put in place to make sure that no medicine which is introduced onto the market will ever happen again that is going to cause the kind of severe adverse side effects that we saw in so many people. But we've been told again and again and again the mantra that these experimental injections are safe and effective. But to be sure that they're safe, they need to have rigorous long-term safety data, which takes at least 10 years. They were rushed through in 3 months. So anybody with even a little bit of scientific understanding and knowledge could have seen that this was wrong and it was potentially a disaster. But this wasn't just something that was given to adults. The age of the people that the government and the powers that be wanted to inject these things into decreased and decreased and decreased, from 50-year-olds to all adults to teenagers to children to babies down to 6 months old. Now that, of course, we know is wrong. But what I would warn you to do today is beware of those people who promote it and push these things when they should have been speaking out in 2021. And now today, in 2024, they're saying, oh, the science has changed. We know now that they're wrong and we're calling for an inquiry. Beware of wolves in sheep's clothing. The second thing, which is attacking our children in a heinous way, is the whole transgender agenda. This, to me, came out of nowhere in about 2015. I'd never heard of it before, but now it's been mainstreamed so much that there is a whole subject called relationships and sex education, which is being taught to children across the UK and in many, many other countries around the world. Children are being given lesson materials which promote confusion about their gender and actually introduce a concept that there is something called gender that is different to biological sex. There isn't. There is only biological sex. There are two sexes, male and female. Your sex is assumed at birth. It's not defined by gender ideology. And it's not something that you can change willy-nilly like the gender activists say. But the thing is, children are being confused by this. And many of them are being put down roads where their gender confusion is affirmed, and therefore they're put onto puberty blockers, sex change hormones, and even surgery, which will sterilize those children. And many of them later on have trans regret. But it's too late. They're sterile and they will never have their own children. So these children themselves are targeted, and the results of that is sometimes absolutely horrible and tragic, in that if they succumb to this, they can never have children themselves, and their line is cut off. Another thing that affects our children are the grooming gangs and the county lines gangs, where Women or girls and boys are particularly targeted by those two things respectively, but they're allowed to go on. We all know about them, but so little is done about them, particularly the grooming gang aspect. We know that early whistleblowers have called this out from 2008. Peter McCulloch wrote a whole book about this in 2015 called Easy Meat, where he researched everything to do with grooming gangs, how they were happening in the UK and also the Netherlands and other countries, and how the state and the powers that be were just ignoring them because they didn't want to be accused of being racist because of the people who were perpetrating these gangs. These are all things that are attacking our children. And I've only got halfway through my monologue. I'm going to have to finish it tomorrow. But one thing I'll finish with here. Edmund Burke, as you probably know, and the famous quote from him is that all it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Now, he wrote that in the 18th century. So, of course, in those times, men were only active in public life. Women were not in public life so much as men. Today, in the 21st century, men and women together have to step up to make sure that evil doesn't triumph. Let's step up against all of these things and protect our children from those things which are coming against them to harm them. And let's restore our nation and make it a place where our children can thrive and prosper once again. This is today's News Talk, TNT.
Bringing you a world view.
I like to hear what's going on around the world.
Today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Welcome back, everybody. This is today's News Talk, TNT. And I have with me, as always, Gemma Cooper.